والسلام عليك يا رسول الله أستغفر الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله cheeky. So Jazakallah to everyone for appreciate you coming and your attendance and support, encouragement. Lesson number 17 out of the 47 sins of the heart, the viruses of the heart. We'll just cover one today because it is quite detailed. So we're covering two a day for the past few lessons. They're quite short. Negative assumptions, but Ghumani in Persian and Urdu, but Ghumani in Arabic it's su'ul dhan. Very important because obviously, what's that famous saying in English? It's when you control your thoughts that you control your speech, and then you control your actions. It's thoughts that become words, words become actions, actions become habits, habits become destiny. So negative assumptions are haram as well. So obviously it's a very serious thing if something's haram. If something's haram, then it's for us to avoid it. So negative assumption is to the definition, a Quranic verse, a hadith, a story, and then the causes. Because negative assumptions are permissible sometimes as well. So we need to study when they're haram, when they are wajib, when it's mubah, when it's permissible to have a negative judgment about a person. We could call it negative judgments as well. And then we'll do the 7 cures, causes and cures. So it's page number 129, definition of negative assumption. Shaykh Tariqat Amir al-Sunnat, founder of Dawat Islami, Maulana Abu Bilal Muhammad al-Qadri, he states, a negative assumption means to form a certain negative assumption, a negative opinion about another individual without evidence. So making a concrete, certain negative opinion about someone without sufficient evidence. So making a confirmed negative opinion.
Is that just in your head?
Yeah,
or
yaqeen. Verbally would be backbiting. Verbally would become backbiting or slandering. So even in your head, even if you're not spoken it. So basically, negative judgments are the backbiting of the heart, of the mind. This backbiting haram hai. It's haram to make negative assumptions without dalil against people. So to answer your question, even without speaking, just believing something firmly. It's one thing that just a thought rushes into your head, and you say, no, I shouldn't be thinking that, and you rush it back out. That's not haram. That's beyond our control. We can't help in all times. Thoughts are coming, good and bad ideas are coming to our mind. So just having a sudden, spontaneous negative judgment or negative idea about someone is not haram, but without evidence, turning that into a belief, turning a negative assumption about someone, a negative judgment into a belief, and you believe it without evidence, that will become haram. A blessed verse, Allah Almighty has commanded in the Holy Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu jtanibu kathiran min al-dhann. Dhann, the word dhann means thoughts, ideas. Inna ba'da al-dhanni, there's that word again. Ithmun means sin. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. So the word dhann has come twice, and dhann means thoughts. وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. يغتب غيبة, backbiting. يغتب, backbiting. أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. Very comprehensive verse. This you can many khatibs, many speakers, you can do many Jummah speeches on this topic. O believers, avoid much suspicions. Indeed, some suspicions become sin. And do not search for hidden faults. Do not backbite one another. Would any one amongst you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? So you will not tolerate this. And fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is the great acceptor of repentance. He is ever merciful. So obviously when the Quranic is saying backbiting is haram, and when you want to really prohibit something, you would give an example of something despicable, and you will say, well, that's despicable, so consider this act as despicable as that as well. So the Quran Kareem is saying that backbiting your brother is like eating his flesh after he's died. Okay, so that's an image, and a horrible image that comes in our mind, but that's the whole point, to make us detest and despise and consider backbiting a despicable action. So this ayat karima is not just about suspicion, it's about not backbiting, it's about not spying as well, not being. So there were three things mentioned in that verse. The first thing was don't be suspicious of Muslims. The second was don't look for secret faults. The third one was don't backbite. But we're just focusing on the suspicions at the moment. I'll go straight to the tafsir. It is prohibited. It is prohibited mana to think negatively about a pious Muslim, and similarly, it is also prohibited for you to form a negative judgment about a comment that he made, despite the existence of possible positive interpretations of his comment, bearing in mind that this particular Muslim's actions do not contradict those positive interpretations either. So if a Muslim's done something, it's an action that can be interpreted in two different ways, a good way and a bad way, then it's your job to interpret it in a good way. If he says something which is a dual meaning sentence, I mean, every sentence has at least two meanings, two interpretations. One interpretation is good and bad. Our job is to assume, give him the benefit of the doubt, and assume that he's meant the good thing, unless his actions or his statements are clearly, it's clear that he's meant the bad thing. Then you can form a negative judgment upon him, but until then, have good judgments. So Sayyidina Sufyan Sawri rahmatullah alayhi stated, judgments are of two types, one that enters your heart and exits your tongue as well. If this is bad and is against a Muslim, then it is a sin. The second one, which enters your heart but does not exit your tongue, although this is not a sin, it is still necessary to eliminate this from your heart too. Ruling opinions, judgments are of many categories. The first is necessary wajib, which is to have a good opinion about Allah Almighty. So having good opinions about Allah Ta'ala is wajib. The second is preferable, mustahab, having admirable opinions about pious Muslims. And the third is forbidden and haram, which is to have negative opinions about Allah Almighty and pious Muslims. The fourth is permissible, which is to have an unfavorable opinion about an openly sinful Muslim, regarded that openly visible sin. So judgments are of four types. What were the four types? Necessary, mustahab, preferable. The third was haram, and the fourth was permissible. Okay. So necessary, it's wajib to have good opinions about Allah Ta'ala, yani Allah is all merciful, etc. And
Also, for the necessary.
Gigi.
How come it's not written as a fault?
Yeah, the word necessary encompasses fard and wajib. Yeah. A haram guman with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, haram a thought about Allah ta'ala would be, he's not going to feed me, or he's not going to protect me, or he's not going to help me. Okay, so this is haram as well. Just like saying Allah's not going to feed me, saying that verbally is haram, thinking that is haram as well, believing that is haram as well. Okay, the wajib, so thinking good about Allah Ta'ala all the time, that is wajib. It's mustahab, it's preferable to have good opinions about pious Muslims. And the third one is haram, which is the haram opinions or judgments, to have haram opinions about Allah Almighty and about pious Muslims. So in a haram opinion, I gave an example, would be like the thinking that Allah is not going to feed you or protect you, when He's promised that He will do those things in the Quran Sharif. And which is the permissible? When is it permissible for us to have a bad opinion about someone? If it's clear, if someone's committing a sin clearly in front of you, obviously that's visible. If someone's drinking alcohol in front of you, and the next time you see him, you've seen him once, mushahada. The next time you see him, even though and he's got a bottle in his hand, you can't see what type of bottle it is, but for you to think, well, it might be a sharab bottle. But that, because you've seen him once with a sharab bottle, and the second time you're just assuming that that might be sharab as well, even though you don't know what it is. That's a permissible guna, because that's based on what you've seen in the past. You've had business dealings with someone and he's definitely betrayed you in the past. So now this time he's saying, I want to enter into another contract with you, and you're thinking, well, no, this guy's dodgy. Well, you're allowed to think he's dodgy because he's been dodgy. But Islam is not saying avoid negative judgments about someone who's clearly been bad and just ignore your experiences. Islam saying there's people you don't know about, situations that you're not involved with, don't just form judgments without proper tahqiq. That's what the situation is. So if you've been mistreated by someone in the past and now he's saying, you can trust me now, and I want to be friends with you again and stuff. For you to be suspicious, that's permissible. That's because the definition of haram suspicion is suspicion baseless. Suspicion that's not based on experience, and that's not based on dalil. That's not based on dalil.
In any situation where you could exercise caution.
Yeah. But just your businessman that you don't even know, just saying he's dodgy and stuff without even knowing him, without experiencing him, that would be suspicion. Yeah,
Also, you have to see yourself, or if somebody, a person you trust, and tells you.
Trustworthy person. Yeah. That's especially when it comes to Aqidah. I was just reading just the other day in the Fatawa Razvi, Allah Hazrat was talking about Imamat and Masail. I was reading, and he was asked a question. If we're on a journey and there's an Imam and we don't know whether the Imam is a valid Imam, if he's a qualified, as in terms of Aqidah, can we pray behind him, and or should we not? And he said, well, if you've got a reason to doubt his Aqidah, like if it's an area, if it's a mahalla of people of wrong Aqidah, or you've heard from someone else that that his Aqidah is wrong, then you should do tahqiq about his Aqidah. But if there's no reason to doubt it, Allah has said, just pray behind him. If later you find out his Aqidah was wrong, you can repeat it. So you can answer to your question. If someone reliable tells you, you can base a but not based like 100% judgment. Depending on these days, our definition of reliable is very loose as well. We'll have to define that someday. Reliable needs to be defined. So yeah, sort of, if someone reliable has told you, oh, watch out, be wary of this guy, just because of that, you've been told by him, yeah, be a bit wary, but still do your own tahqiq. Don't make like a form of 100% opinion just based on what someone else has told you. These days, people are, he might be making a mistake. So don't make a 100% judgment. Obviously, if you see something yourself, you'll be 100% convinced this guy is dodgy, he's dealt with me, he's cheated me before. But if someone else tells you that he's, be careful of him, then you have suspicion, do your own tahqiq. Don't be as certain as though you've seen it. There should be a difference. The blessed hadith, a bad judgment about a Muslim is a bad opinion about Allah Ta'ala. The mother of believers, Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, narrated that the Prophet ﷺ warned, anyone who possesses a bad opinion about his brother has certainly held a bad opinion about his creator, since Allah Almighty warns in the Holy Quran, Ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann, avoid much suspicion. This is a part of that verse that we've already read on the other page. The ruling on negative assumption, I'm going to go straight to the ruling, which is the fifth line from the bottom. A person will not be considered a sinner at the exact moment any negative opinion enters his heart about another individual, since declaring him as worthy of divine punishment for merely thinking a condemnable thought would mean laying an unbearable, unavoidable burden upon him, which is against Islamic principles. Allah Almighty proclaims, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not place a burden upon any soul except to the extent of its strength. So what that paragraph meant was that, I already mentioned that earlier as well, that sometimes, obviously, it's beyond our control, like thoughts rush in and out of our minds. You might see someone and not know him. You might not know him. You might not know someone, and a negative thought about him might just rush into your mind. So that's not haram. As soon as just thinking something negative is not haram. Without opinion, turning that negative opinion into a solid belief, that's haram. So if you thought something bad about someone, and then you say, no, I shouldn't be thinking that, well, that's not haram. Two cases of forbidden negative assumptions. Number one, allowing the negative assumption to become firmly embedded inside your heart. The commentator of Bukhari, Allama Badruddin Aini, elaborates, a forbidden negative assumption is one that you are persistent with and allowed to settle firmly inside your heart, not one that enters your heart without settling, i.e. not a short-staying one that just passes through. So a short-staying Ghumani about someone is not haram, something that just came in your mind and you just ignored. But an opinion about someone, that opinion is baseless and it's not based on something you've seen, a proper solid proof, and making a negative assumption about someone, that's a sin. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi states, suspecting a Muslim is forbidden just as verbally speaking ill about him is forbidden. Okay, so the way backbiting is forbidden, speaking bad about a Muslim is forbidden, haram, thinking bad about a Muslim is haram. Negative assumption means to form a certain yaqini, condemnable opinion, bad opinion about another individual in your heart. As far as temporary speculations and fleeting assumptions are concerned, they are forgiven, they're not sinful, they're beyond our control. In fact, even a fleeting doubt regarding somebody else is forgiven, it's not a sin. When you, the noble Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you suspect someone, they do not let your negative assumptions settle. Okay, so this is a hadith of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you, if you have a shaitan's going to want, always whispering on our minds, he wants us to suspect each other. Because suspicion leads to doubt leads to disunity. He wants us to be disunited. So one of the shaitan's biggest tricks is just speak on half of these thoughts that are coming to our minds, which we think, we say, yeah, I had a thought. No, you didn't have a thought. That's a lot of those. The shaitans, you're listening to the devil speak to you. Okay, or those thoughts that come in our mind, we think we're just thinking that we're not. Our thoughts are a combination of our nafs, waswasas from your nafs, waswasas from the devil, some inspirations from an angel. We all have an angel with us, and sometimes there's ilham directly. Allah Pak inspires you to think something. So to know the difference, to know what is what, is very, very hard. Part of tasawwuf is trying to figure out these thoughts, trying to differentiate. Well, this one is from the shaitan, this one is from the nafs, this one is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from the angel. The shaitan can even sometimes to trick you, put a good idea in your mind as well. So there are books, if I remember at the end, I'll recommend one or two English books which talk about how to differentiate those thoughts.
I read that Imam Ghazali mentions that the shaitan's tricks, he imitates your own voice inside your own head. So that's what you think you had an idea, and you think it makes it sound good.
Yeah, so it makes sense. So, but Ghumani is haram because obviously, if you're all suspecting each other, we're never trusting each other. Where's that muhabbat? So shaitan wants disunity, and disunity starts. It doesn't just start with the backbiting and the accusations. It starts before then. It starts with you just being too quick to make judgments. So you got to focus on the thoughts before you focus on backbiting. So the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, that was a hadith. I'll say that hadith again on the top of page 133. When you suspect someone, then do not let your negative assumptions settle. So if a suspicion comes in your mind, don't let it, don't feed it, don't let it stay there. The quicker you take it out, the easier it is. This means do not provide any room for it in your heart or express it through any of your actions or reinforce your negative assumption through your body language. For example, if shaitan makes you think that a particular pious Muslim is showing off, so that's one, he's showing off. Well, that's none of your business if someone's showing off or not. That's between him and Allah Ta'ala. If shaitan makes you think that someone is showing off, but you instantly dismiss that thought and form a good assumption in your heart about him being sincere, that he's sincere, he's not showing off, then in this case you have not committed a sin or done anything which is punishable. On the contrary, on the opposite, if you do not dismiss the negative assumption and allow it to settle firmly inside your heart until it turns into a certain judgment, after which you begin to firmly believe that this particular person is a show-off, then in this case you are a sinner due to your condemnable negative assumption, even if you do not express anything about this with your tongue. So if you just assume that someone's a show-off and you actually believe that, that would be a sin, whether or not he might really be showing off, but that's between him and Allah Ta'ala, that's his guna. That doesn't allow us to assume, unless we've got proper evidence, unless it's very clear from his attitude or his actions. Number two, as in we were studying the two cases of forbidden haram negative assumptions. The two haram. Case number 2, verbal mention of or behavior in accordance with a negative assumption. Allama Abdul Ghani Nabulusi rahmatullah alayhi, he writes, harboring negative opinions about Muslims on the basis of doubt or negative assumption is forbidden, it's haram. If you express such a negative assumption through your body language, i.e. the negative assumption manipulated your behavior, for instance, mentioning the negative assumption verbally. Okay. Allama Sayyid Mahmood Alusi wrote, page 134. When a negative thought involuntarily enters your heart, then it is forbidden to convert it into anything practical, forbidden to behave in accordance with the negative opinion, meaning to harm the object of your negative assumption by belittling him or speak ill of him or verbally mention your condemnable thought about him. For example, if someone invites you to his home and you do not go, then the next time you meet the individual who extended the invitation to you and you offer an excuse for your absence, but shaitan makes him suspect you of lying, and in accordance with his negative assumption, he instantly proclaims you are lying, then this negative assumption is forbidden, haram. Haram. You then dawah to someone and he didn't come, next time you saw him, he gave you an excuse, and you think, no, you're making up excuses, that's haram, unless you've got a valid reason. Don't suspect him of, accept his uzr. Sometimes, sometimes we hear a piece of news about someone and it affects our judgment on the subconscious. It makes us, Shahid, just for example, Shahid might say something to me about Mubashir, I'll say, Shahid, stop talking about it, and Ghumani nahi karni chahiye. And I think because I've stopped him, I've not formed a negative assumption. But then if next time I meet Mubashir, I'm not smiling as much as I used to, or my salam isn't as cheerful, enigmatic and brotherly as it used to be, and I'm not sort of even, my face isn't focused, turning towards him as much as it used to be, but my body language is saying that what he put in my heart, I've actually on a subconscious level, I've actually believed it. I've drifted away from him. So when you hear things about people, don't change your attitude towards the people that you've heard them about, unless there's proof from proper tahqiq. Don't even change the way you do salam with them. And you might not realize your attitude, your salam is heal, no, he's not meeting me with as much love and compassion as he used to. You're not noticing your facial expressions and your the direction or the angle of your body, and how you're meeting someone, and how you're turning your eyes away from people. Do notice that, who are used to seeing you on a regular basis. A wise negative assumption about Ghumani, haram, forbidden, haram. Hujjatul Islam, Sayyidina Imam Muhammad, Abu Hamid, Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali rahmatullahi said, the reason for negative assumptions about Ghumani being forbidden, haram, is that only Allah Ta'ala is aware of the secrets of hearts. Therefore, it is not permissible for you to inform a negative judgment about another person unless you witness his fault in an uninterpretable, doubtless way. Okay, so we said earlier, if someone does something and it looks suspicious, but there's a good interpretation as well, our job is to assume the best. If he says something that sounds suspicious, but there is a good interpretation, and that depends on your knowledge. The smarter you are, the more interpretations you can derive from one action. The smarter you are, the more interpretations you can derive from one statement. Only a fool, idiots just see someone do something and then just like, what's that? Narrow-mindedly just say, well, no, he must have meant this. No, there's two interpretations. Someone smarter will say, no, well, he could have done it for this reason, he could have done that, he could have done it that. There's three possible intentions. Someone smarter will say there's five possible things. He might have just been having a bad day and be tired, knackered, come back from work. So if he didn't say salam to you enigmatically or passionately, it doesn't mean he's got a grudge for you. There's 10 reasons why someone just didn't feel like answering your phone. It's not wajib. If he didn't pick up a phone, he didn't pick up my phone, he's trying to avoid me. No, it's not wajib for someone to, when someone calls us, it's not wajib for us to answer the call. So you need to increase your knowledge, understand when it's wajib for someone to do something. So the more knowledge you have, the more narrow-minded you are, the more badgumani you're going to do, the more knowledge you have, the more husnizan you're going to have. You're going to be broader-minded as well, and you'll be able to defend people as well.
What to do avoid? You don't want to pick it up.
You don't have to. It's not. If you don't want to, you just don't feel like answering a call. You don't have to. It's not haram. No haram. You don't have to answer someone's call. Yeah.
At work.
I know. I answer a call from your bosses. I don't want you losing your jobs. Like if your boss calls you, so answer it.
Ustad said.
Don't let Ustad said we don't have to answer your calls,
Yeah.
and then lose your job, and then
What are you picking up for? It's not around.
where do we get to? I'll skip that. That's a repetition of what we've done. I'll go to the top of page 135, and this is still Imam Ghazali speaking. In fact, even if a person's mouth smells of wine, it is not permissible to inflict the Islamic legal penalty on him, since it is possible for him to have instantly spat out the wine after taking just a sip of it. Or maybe he was physically forced to drink it. This is Imam Ghazali talking. It is forbidden to testify that he drank wine based simply on your heart's assumption and without Islamic legal evidence in the presence of these positive justifications. And there's a story here, there's a very long story about Bishr Hafi radiallahu anhu, Wali Kamil, and there was someone who wasn't really a lover of Sufis and used to see Bishr Hafi, and Bishr Hafi used to exit the masjid straight away. And this person, he didn't like Sufis anyway. He was like a businessman. These Sufis, they're just nobodies. They don't do anything. And look, he goes after namaz straight away. He doesn't even stick around the masjid. And Bishr Hafi radiallahu anhu, he followed him. Let me see where he's going. And then he ends up being ashamed that Bishr Hafi used to leave the masjid early. He used to visit someone sick so he could feed them. So he wasn't leaving just because he didn't want to sit in the mood. He wanted to fulfill some desire or something like that. And then he repented. It's a long, I'm just giving you a 2-line summary. But then that person repented and became a lover of the Sufiya, a follower of the Sufiya. Yeah, but do read that on your own, please. It's a nice story. We'll go to the 7 cures for negative assumptions. Then I want to read some books to you from this book written on negative assumptions. We'll go straight to number 1. So 7 cures, and then we'll focus on the admirable qualities of Muslims instead of prying into flaws of Muslims. Look at their good qualities. Anyone who has good opinions about them will experience tranquility in his heart. But if you are wounded by the devil's weapon and fall victim to the dreadful habit of negative assumptions, then your heart will transform into a home of terror. Okay. So focus on the good qualities of Muslims. Number 2, divert your attention away from the negative assumption. Whenever a bad speculation about another Muslim enters your heart, you should dismiss it and instead try to form a good opinion about that particular action that caused you to form the negative assumption. For example, if you see an Islamic brother crying whilst he's listening to a nasheed or speech, and a condemnable opinion about him enters your heart, i.e., you assume that he's showing off, or he's just trying to act pious, he's trying to act like a Sufi, he's crying and rocking his head during zikr, then you should instantly form the opinion that he's weeping with sincerity. Convince yourself. It's not wajib for us to figure out. Allah Ta'ala is not going to ask us in the grave, did you figure out who was showing off in the dunya? That's not my job to figure out who's showing off, or isn't my job to avoid showing off myself. Sayyidina Makhul Damishki rahmatullah advised, when you witness someone crying, then you should cry too, not assume that he's showing off. I suspected someone of showing off once, as a result of which I could not cry for a whole year. Okay, so crying out of fear of Allah, that's a ibadat as well. That's a great sa'adat. Or the Anbiya Ikram, the Awliya Ikram, the Sahaba Ikram crying. The Quran Kareem describes the pious people are those whose tears fall onto their cheeks. So being deprived of crying is a sign of hard-heartedness and negligence. So sometimes you can get punished. And this Shaykh is saying, I suspected someone of showing off. Because of that, Allah Ta'ala punished me, chastised me in the dunya, and I was deprived of the tawfiq of this great ibadat, crying due to fear of Allah. I didn't have the tawfiq to cry for a whole year because of that Ghumani. So sometimes we're punished for sins by Allah Ta'ala takes the tawfiq of good deeds away from you. So punishment isn't just an earthquake and fireballs raining from the sky. Not having the tawfiq to do good deeds, that is punishment. Number 3, be pious yourself so that other people appear pious to you too. Rectify your own personal lens through which you look at others. Continue attempting to be a devout and pious individual, since a pious individual will have pleasant opinions about others. On the other hand, if you are a sinner yourself, then you will have an unpleasant perception of other people. There is an Arabic saying, when a man's deeds are wicked, so are his thoughts. Okay. The Imam of the Ahl Sunnah, Maulana Shah Imam Ahmad Raza Khan, alayhi rahmatur rahman, said, a foul thought emanates from a foul heart. Khabis guman, Sayyidi Al-Aziz said, Khabis guman, Khabis dil se nikalta hai. So, apna dil theek ho to khayalat bhi theek honge. If our heart is clean, then our thoughts will be clean. Inshallah. Number 4, evil company encourages evil thoughts about. Avoid sinful company and befriend pious people. Besides acquiring many other blessings, you will also find this to be a remedy for refraining from making unpleasant speculations about other people. Sayyidina Bishr ibn Harith rahmatullahi said, Suhbatul ashrar turithu su'a dhanni bil akhyar. Bad company will make you have unpleasant thoughts about good people. Okay. I've got this saying in front of me in Urdu as बुरे लोगों की सोहबत नेकों से बदगुमानी पैदा करती है. The company of bad people makes you have bad thoughts about good people. Number 5, if you have an evil negative assumption about another person, then frighten yourself of the divine punishment of Allah Ta'ala. Whenever you form an unpleasant assumption about another Muslim, then scare yourself of the consequence of negative assumptions as well as the punishment of Allah Almighty. In part 15, Spara 15, verse 36 of Surah Bani Israel, Allah Almighty states, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. And do not pursue the matter of which you do not have knowledge. Indeed, the ear, the eye, and the heart, all of these are going to be questioned. There is a hadith in Bukhari Sharif there, just a 2-line hadith. The inmate of hell who will suffer the lightest punishment will have to wear shoes of fire that will cause his brain to boil. So if badgumani is haram, jealousy is haram, backbiting is haram, if due to these harams, if we are subjected to even the lightest punishment, well, that's the smallest punishment, and even that's unbearable. So we should always be afraid of the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 6, if you form an unpleasant, negative assumption about another person, then pray for yourself. Whenever you sense a bad assumption about somebody else emerging inside your mind, pray to Allah Almighty like this: O Lord of Mustafa Almighty, this weak servant of yours wants to save his heart from this evil negative assumption in order to avoid destruction in this world and the next. O Allah Almighty, save me from negative assumptions, this deadly satanic weapon, and bless me with the wonderful treasure of having pleasant assumptions about others. You can go to number 7, pray for the victim of your negative assumption. Whenever an unpleasant negative assumption about another Islamic brother enters your heart, then pray for his prosperity, all the while increasing your respect and honor for him. Imam Ghazali, finally, the last paragraph is some advice by Imam Ghazali. He suggests, whenever you make a negative assumption about another Muslim, you should increase your respect and honor for him, as well as pray for his well-being, since this will outrage shaitan and make him flee from you. So consequently, in future, shaitan will be afraid to instill a bad assumption inside your heart again, in case you increase your respect for your victim even more, and in case you recite another prayer for his well-being. Sallu ala al-Habib. So we've covered, there's a lot more, read into that even more, this issue about negative assumptions being haram. We have said a lot of the negative assumptions these days just seem to be najais, they seem to be prohibited. Even though we've studied that sometimes it's jais to have negative assumptions about people. We have studied sometimes it's negative. So if there's obviously one good piece of advice also is, try to avoid, your part of the sunnah, a really good piece of advice is try avoiding, in fact I'll tell you the hadith first. There's a riwayat, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he said that if you do something suspicious yourself, if you put yourself in a doubtful position yourself, even though you weren't doing something haram, then you don't blame people if they have suspicion against you. So that is a riwayat as well. So I'm being careful not to call it hadith. I've got a feeling there might be hadith. Ittaqu mawadi'atuhum, avoid places of blame. And one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, he said, don't do things even though they're halal, but they are, especially in front of idiots, if they can be easily misinterpreted, because idiots are quick to make bad judgments. They're very slow to accept explanations. Making bad judgments is easy, not everyone's going to listen to your explanation, and some people, no matter how much, whatever safa you give, they don't listen to your explanations. So you self, and there's a really good example from the hadith. You know, the Prophet ﷺ was once with one of his azwaj mutahharat, with a lady, and a sahabi was walking past, and the Prophet ﷺ himself explained to the sahabi, "This is my wife." And the sahabi was like, Ya Rasulullah, they are Ashik Rasools. Ya Rasulullah, subhanallah, words to the effect of, Ya Rasulullah, you didn't need to explain to me, I don't need an explanation who you stood with. But Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that, that's when he said that famous sentence, Shaitan runs in the body of a human like blood. It only takes a second for him to make you think someone stood with someone, a woman that they're not related to. Even that was Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Sahaba would not have but Ghumani with the Prophet ﷺ, but Huzur still is doing tarbiyat of the ummah, and he's, without being asked for an explanation, he's giving an explanation. So sometimes if you think someone's gonna, and that was for us really, if you're doing something and you think, well, this situation could be misinterpreted and someone's walking past, you might get the wrong idea, even if he's not asked for an explanation, just sometimes explain yourself. Another example, I think one brother was stood about drinking some water, and sometimes people, standing up and drinking water is not haram. It's makruh tanzihi, it's not makruh tahrimi. So it's permissible even if someone doesn't have a uzr. It's sunnah to sit down, but brother standing up and drinking water, and someone might think, well, isko sharam nahi aati, dari hai, ye mama hai, he doesn't know he's supposed to sit down and drink water. So the brothers explained himself without any comments, because that's a possible thought that could come in. He just said, okay, so Abhi Zamzam, just to clarify, it's Zamzam water. That's why I was stood up. Okay. So that is from the hadith as well, that sometimes it's given an explanation yourself. So back, having evil suspicions about a Muslim is haram, just as speaking even of him. The Buzurgani Deen said, there's a really good statement of the Salaf Salihin, the Sufiya. They say that before you have one evil suspicion about someone, give him 70, actually make 70 excuses for your brother before you make an evil suspicion for him. He might have meant this, he might have meant that, he might have meant that. So by 70 they meant a lot. And there's a riwayat that says, Al-mu'minu yatlubul ma'adib wal-munafiqu yatlubul uyub. A Muslim searches for excuses, a hypocrite searches for faults. मुसलमान उज़र तलाश करता है, मुनाफिक जो है वो ऐब तलाश करता है. तो हुज़ूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम did say, there's three sins that will always remain. अच्छा गुमान अच्छी इबादत है. Thinking good of people is a good ibadat. Thinking good of people is a good ibadat as well. Sayyidina Bakr bin Abdullah, he said, whenever you see someone older than you, think that he's better than me because he worshipped Allah Ta'ala before me. Whenever you see someone younger than you, think he's better than me because I've got more sins than him. And he said that badgumani is something. Avoid badgumani, avoid negative assumptions. It's a useless thing. Avoid badgumani, because even if your false judgment about someone is correct, you're not going to get any sawab for it. If you made a false judgment, you're not going to get a sawab. But if you happen to be wrong, you're going to get a guna. So why do something that even if you're right in it, you're not going to get any sawab, but if you're wrong, you're going to get a guna? You get some fayda in doing it. Unless we've discussed, you've had personal dealings, you've been mistreated by someone, business dealings. Obviously, Shariat doesn't say just blindly trust someone who's nicked money off you before and have husn zan with it. He's not going to cheat you again. No, you're allowed to do badgumani. It's jaiz badgumani if you've got evidence. That's jaiz badgumani. That's permissible. So that was a statement by one of the Sufiya. Badgumani is something that even if you're right in it, you're not going to get any sawab. But if you're wrong, it's going to be guna. So why take that risk? Why take that risk? We already studied that statement about that Buzurg. He said, if you see someone crying, don't suspect him of showing off. I was deprived of the tawfiq of crying. Sometimes due to a sin, you can be deprived of the tawfiq to pray namaz with Jamaat as well. Sometimes the Sufia say that if you commit a sin, ye bhi azab hai, Allah Ta'ala takes your izzat out of the hearts of your own wife and children. So sometimes, yeah, if your wife and children are disrespecting you, first reaction should be istighfar wa avoid, and Allah Ta'ala has taken my habit or my respect out of the heart of my children. So that can be there. So we should always, that's the attitude that the Sufia used to have. The Sufia used to have. And yeah. ठीक है. So Gigi, feel free to.
Politicians
Yeah.
have negative opinions or opinions of them because of the stance they take on the party issues.
Stance. Obviously, politicians, we don't know what their role is. Half the time, we don't know what they're talking about, do we? If obviously someone's clearly said something wrong.
Say, for instance, you've got Muslim MPs standing for conservatives who are, what's happening in Palestine. Can this? They want your votes, etc., but you're having.
Ask them, tahqiq. Ask them. Even politicians, just because, even if you don't like someone because they've done one thing, tahqiq karte hain. I think just.
Because you might be doing something behind closed doors to rectify that problem, you don't know about it. Even if they're still in the party, maybe still trying to make a change, possibly. Hopefully.
Inshallah. Just one finally, and Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, when there's three of you are together, two of you shouldn't leave the third one and just start whispering to each other. This is a hadith. If there's three of you, if there was only me, Mubashir and Dawood, and me and Mubashir just start talking amongst ourselves, and Dawood can't even hear us. एक तो ये बेअदबी है कि the third brother could think that they're talking about him. दूसरा ये भी है, it could enter his mind that they say something that they think I'm not worthy of understanding, or I'm not worthy of that thing being shared with you. So these are the words of our Prophet ﷺ, teaching us how to even talk when there's a group of you. If there's three of you, or if there's four of you, I think this is the commentary I read. It's not, the hadith says, if there's three of you, जब तीन आदमी हो तो तीसरे को छोड़कर दो आदमी सरगोशी ना करें. Sargoshi whispering. If there's three of you, two of you shouldn't leave the third one and start whispering. If there's four, then the Sharihin, the ulama say that's okay, because if two of you are talking, well, there's two there. They can talk amongst themselves. Then I think it's okay. Jazakallah for your time. It's 50. We've gone 5 minutes over. Very important topics. Do study that on your own as well. Anything on this topic, like I said, it's haram, so it's necessary for us to. Having good opinions about people is a good ibadat. Say.
There's a question that's
Ji
not
Shahid.
related to this, but related to something that